Hello everyone, welcome back to Scoreline. My name is Harish, and let's go over SAT grammar. So SAT grammar is sometimes hard, okay? But let's use this video in order to get almost all the questions right in as short amount of time as possible. So I want you guys to apply these rules to your SAT grammar instead of choosing what just sounds right. On the SAT, if you choose what sounds right in your mind as opposed to actually what's on the rules, most likely you're going to get the question wrong. So learning the rules can be a vital tool, okay? So the foundation of all this is each complete sentence must have a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. The example of this is the engineer presented the design. That's a complete thought. It has a subject and it has a verb, okay? A dependent clause, it's not complete because if we read the example, because the engineer presented the design, the thought isn't complete. It leaves us like wanting more. What happens because the engineer presented the design? Because the engineer presented the design, comma, the company won the tender or whatever, okay? So yeah. That is sentence structure, okay? Now let's look at a common SAT error. So a comma splice is when two independent clauses, I shouldn't say sentences, but two independent clauses are joined with only a comma. So the incorrect usage of this is the experiment ended early, comma, the researchers analyzed the data. So when you sound this out, it may seem correct, right? But it's not. The reason being is because there's two independent clauses here, meaning the two clauses can stand independently. So how this works is if I put a period there, or a semicolon there, or a comma fanboy there, the two clauses would stand completely fine. So I just said it there, but the possible fixes are if we're using a period to fix that, or using a semicolon to fix that, or using a comma fanboy to fix that. So an example of this is the experiment ended early, so the researchers analyzed the data. Or I could even say, instead of the comma here, I can put a period. Just capitalize this. And this would also be correct. The experiment ended early. Let me just remove that. The experiment ended early, period. The researchers analyzed the data. Or I could use this semicolon here. And that would also stand as correct, okay? All right, next one. Commas can be used to separate items in a list. You most likely already know this rule, but let's go over it anyways. An example of this is the backpack contained notebooks, pencils, and a calculator. Or, Harish brought water, an approved calculator, and determination to the SAT. Commas can also denotate non-essential information, so you can use commas around extra information. How this works is the athlete who trained for months finally competed. If I remove the middle phrase, who trained for months, if the phrase is removed, the sentence still works, right? The athlete finally competed. So that this would be non-essential information, okay? Commas and fanboys can be used to connect two independent clauses. As we saw on the first comma splices slide, this is one of the use cases where we can join two independent clauses. So the fanboys are for, and, nor, but, or, so, or, yet, so. And these can be used to connect two independent clauses. What I mean by this is the weather looked terrible, but the game continued anyway. Harish reviewed every practice test, so he felt confident on exam day. Commas can be they can be placed after introductory phrases or clauses, okay? So before submitting the application, Billy checked every detail. After weeks of preparation, Harish walked into the testing room ready. Semicolons, like we discussed in the comma splice slide, can connect two independent clauses. And they can mostly be closely related. You don't need to necessarily know this rule because the SAT will never test you on if a sentence is closely related, but it's good to know. And the main rule is both sides must be able to stand as complete sentences alone, meaning they must be independent clauses. So the library closed early, semicolon. The students continued studying at home. Or I could say Harish is handsome, semicolon, he gets Huz. Notice how in this example, if I put a period here, shoot, what did I do? All right, if I put a period here and change that, it also works, okay? Or if I put a comma fanboy, it also works. Harish is handsome, so he gets Huz. Makes sense, right? Completely correct and true. Okay, anyways. All right. You can use semicolons when list items already contain commas, okay? So what I mean by this is the tour visited Paris, France, Rome, Italy, and Tokyo, Japan. So if I just use commas instead of semicolons in all of this, if you read it, there'll be awkward pauses everywhere, and it just won't be cohesive. So we need this to flow correctly. So we need to use semicolons to help keep complex lists clear. Most of the times, a semicolon will be equivalent. I'm just going to put this equivalent to a period or equivalent to a comma fanboy. Okay, so just know this. This rule isn't applicable all the time because then you have complex lists as well. But most of the time, there are equivalent to periods and comma fanboys because all three of them separate independent clauses. Okay, just know that. And semicolons can also separate complex lists. A colon introduces information that expands or explains the sentence, okay? So the main rule for colons is they must follow a complete sentence, or they must follow an independent clause. What I mean by this is if I say her hobbies are is not an independent clause. Like you have to, there's not a subject, verb, and a complete thought. So that's not an independent clause. So that's the incorrect use case. Well, what would be correct is she enjoys several hobbies: reading, painting, and hiking. So since it has all three of those rules that we saw for sentence structure, I'm just going to pull the rules up. It must have these three things. Since it has all those things, then it will be correct, okay? She enjoys several hobbies: reading, painting, and hiking. That's correct. Another use case is if they're introducing lists, explanations, or examples. Let's look at examples for each of those three. The team needed 3 qualities to succeed: focus, teamwork, and discipline. That's lists. Explanations are: the problem became clear. The formula had been applied incorrectly. You're explaining the previous independent clause. And examples or I would say not examples, but more of clarifications are in the third example. Harish had one mission: ace the SAT. So what that's doing is clarifying what the mission was. Harish had one mission. Yeah, that's a complete and independent thought, but it makes you want to know what the mission was. So that's why we're using the colon in order to quantify or clarify what that mission was. Almost done here, guys. Then we have dashes, which can conclude. Or include is fine, yeah. Dashes can include non-essential information. What I mean by this is this thing, if I just deleted it, it's still correct. The new policy improved workplace safety, right? So that's just non-essential information. And Harish, you might be asking, Harish, bro, why are you doing this to me? I thought you said commas separate non-essential information. That is true. So if I put a comma here instead, it still works. Okay, so both a semicolon and a dash can be used to separate non-essential information. And you might be asking, how do I know which can be used where? Well, Dashes can replace commas, colons, or semicolons when stronger emphasis or a stronger pause is needed. On the SAT, you're not necessarily going to need to know that a stronger pause is wanted, because that's the writer's thing, and you're not 100% going to know that. So on the SAT, you're just going to want to know that if I use a comma and a dash here, that's not going to be correct. Okay, that's not going to be correct. And the reason for that is, if I put a comma here instead of a dash, you're not having two of the same thing. For it to be grammatically correct, it has to be the same thing. So if this is a dash and this is a dash, then it's correct. If this is a comma and this is a comma, then it's correct. Okay? So let's see the comma version as opposed to the dash version. The scientist made a new discovery. Sorry, the scientist made one discovery, a new chemical reaction, which is the same thing as the dash version, which is the scientist made one discovery, a new chemical reaction. The last thing for today are apostrophes, okay? So apostrophes show possession and contraction, okay? All right. So in possession, apostrophes show ownership, meaning like singular possession, meaning one person or thing possessing another object or another objects, right? Like the Sarah's notebook. Sarah is owning the notebook. The teacher's desk. The teacher owns the desk, right? Or if we have plural possession, meaning the end in S. The players' uniforms. Or we can also have irregular plural, which is the children's toys. You're going to treat it as if it's a singular group of things. Like you can say the group of children or the group of children. Like they're owning the toys, right? So contractions combine two words, and the examples of this is don't, do not, can't, cannot, there, they are. And an important distinction you want to make is that the contraction versus the possessive. So with the apostrophe, if you have something that's like it's, then it is. But without the apostrophe, then it's going to be possessive. An example of this is the company increased its profits this year. It wouldn't be appropriate to say the company's increased its profits. So that's why we're using the possessive form of the pronoun, I guess. Okay? So I hope that helped. I hope that will help you on your SAT journey. I will be posting, either myself or Ishant will be posting a SAT grammar hard question review. So by applying these rules that you learned in this video, it will help you on the SAT. Wishing you best of luck, Parish.